when I train sales staffs or individual salespeople how to sell, um, I try to do it in a way that it's not in a vacuum. In other words, I know that when I was trained in sales, and also when I watch businesses train their sales people how they train their sales people, they'll often train them in a vacuum, meaning that it's a lot of rebuttal based. So in other words, if you take the sales process as a whole and you take a very small segment of that sales process, most of the time when they do this, they'll really train on the closing part of it, close, 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 but they'll fail to mention this entire process that led up to the sale that would make it 90% easier, at least, to sell it if they had focused on this part of it also. You worry about the process takes care of most of the results anyway. So if they were totally in the moment with the process, it would do a lot of good towards their end goal of getting that result that they wanted anyway. It just shouldn't be results based. They should focus on the process more. But what they do is they'll take this one segment, usually the close, and they'll focus primarily on that. Well, there's a problem with that. I always had a hard time with it because, I always felt I was one of the better salespeople in any business that I worked for. And I would always have problems when upper management would come in, they would want to do a role play with me. And they would say, okay, this is what's going on, and I just don't have, I just don't have, I have to ask my spouse about it. Yeah, I don't know, I just don't feel like buying right now. I don't know, maybe, can I think about it? Okay, well, if you're just looking for rebuttal-based responses, yeah, I can rattle off a bunch of rebuttals, and that's perfectly fine and good and all that. But I think that's missing so much there that you're not addressing, that if you had just addressed it, you would probably never run into those needs to give rebuttals anyhow, if that makes sense. Or when I'm doing role plays with my salespeople, I don't like to put them in a vacuum. Now, if I'm only doing rebuttals, I might do that a little bit. But I just don't find that to be very useful. I think that is very limiting. A bunch of rebuttals in a vacuum. That's not sales. Sales is the entire process. I'd like to go in and say, okay, if we're going to role play here, let's build a picture. I'll create an entire scene. I'll pretend it's an acting scene. Okay, this was their concern. Or this is what they came up with. This was their problem coming in. These are what their goals are. This is what their driving want was. This is what they've told you thus far, and give them a bunch of different details. I might even write it down for them. And then at the end of it, they said this. Now, go from there. Okay, and it doesn't have to be any specific rebuttal. They can go around and twist in circles and go upside down, do hula hoops. I don't care how they arrive there, as long as they can get me to say yes at the end of that. And it makes sense to me in a logical way, and also, more importantly, it hits me emotionally, and I'm willing to say yes, because they could do a good job. And ideally, through this entire process, I'm going to assume they did that part of it. But again, if they don't know that process, it doesn't matter. You can teach them every rebuttal in the world. Why wait to get all the way there? I'd rather, if I had 100 minutes to train somebody, I'd like to take, and that's all I had, to train one person, 100 minutes. It's not very much to train the entire sales process. But if I had that, and so you got to train this person and give them the best information you can get them to sell one person for $1 million. Okay, you have 100 minutes. How do you allocate that time? Well, I would take 80 to 85% of that time. And, well, maybe not that much, probably 80% or 75% of the time, and talk about the process of getting there first. Yes, there's a science of closing. There's no question about it. And believe me, I want more time to talk about the closing part of it, because I can talk 100 minutes by itself just on the closing part of it. Absolutely. There's a huge science and art to the closing part of it. I'm not denying that. But without this, you're playing again. I mean, if you're just going on rebuttals and that's all you got, you're going to be fighting an uphill battle, and every single presentation you make is going to seem like a chore, and you're going to be worn out. If you find yourself really worn out by the end of these things because you're battling, I mean, I've had battles with people before, and once I got really good at it, what I started to understand is it was a lot less difficult to sell someone if I took care of the process to begin with before I ever got to the sales part of it. I killed concerns before I even got to the part of it where I had to close or I had to offer rebuttals. And a lot of times I wouldn't even meet rebuttals. You hear all the time, a salesperson will hear no 6 times before he gets to yes. Okay, well, if you count like things aren't, if you count responses that aren't exactly no's. In other words, they didn't set the appointment right away. You had to call back. Okay, and then they couldn't commit to the appointment, so then you had to reschedule them. Okay, well, those are technically 2 no's, right? That seems like a lot to me. I mean, I understand that sometimes you do that, and what that's trying to show you is that you need to put in a lot of effort, and persistence outlasts resistance. And I agree with that. But the more efficient you become as a salesperson, more skills you add, and the better you become as a salesperson, you'll start to realize that the more you tidy up and polish and polish those skills that have to do with the presentation. In other words, dropping those seeds like I was talking about. Getting them ready for what's going to come later on. Identifying their driving one and impressing it. Identifying any sort of concerns that they might have way before we ever get to the part where we're asking about money. And then crushing those concerns. And then doing a recap. And then trying to uncover any possible things we might have missed. Crushing those concerns one more time. Then offering again. I forgot the fact we have to qualify them back here also. Then offering again what those services entail, like what we're offering to solve their problem, to heal their pain, and then bam, go into the close. If they have anything left after that, after all that, they have anything left, it should be a very easy thing to just steamroll over at that point. So if it's probably going to be, you can probably isolate it to a really easy concern, like a money concern, or something like that. So it's very simple to overcome. You can probably offer one rebuttal and you're there. Okay? That's it. That's my point. So sales do not occur in a vacuum. They should never occur in a vacuum. And I don't recommend that you train salespeople that way if you're a manager or an owner. That's not to say you can't use it for rebuttal purposes, to learn rebuttals. It's fine. But they should be thinking logically and emotionally so they can come up with their own rebuttals. It shouldn't just be cookie cutter rebuttals. It should be taking what that client has told you during the entire presentation, and I wouldn't say using it against them, but certainly leveraging it. They've told you all the clues that it takes to unlock that treasure, right? They give you there's a lock there, that's that lock. They've given you the key, they've given you the tools, the combination, whatever you want to call it, to unlock it. All you got to do is unlock it. They're telling you everything you need to know. If you ask the proper questions, you did the proper sales presentation, you went off the checklist and did your due diligence throughout the sales process, then it should be a pretty easy layup at that point.